Good. I'm Roger Scoff. I want to welcome you to the show Newport and to Audio University. And I'll be introducing the speakers. First, I want to say something. Hi there. Is this better? Very good, thank you. What I started by saying was welcome to the show Newport, welcome to Audio University. We have a very interesting hobby in that not only do we get to enjoy it when we're not interested in it by just playing music in the background, but we also get to devote a great deal of time to diddling with it, working on it, thinking about it, and like that, and most importantly, reading about it. I don't think there's anybody here that hasn't at some point or another turned to a hi-fi publication as a pastime, as a source of information, or as just keeping up. We are pleased at this point to have the editors of a number of the most important publications in the industry, and these are the people who are providing the information that we all read about. And with no more words, let me turn you over to Robert Harley, who is the editor of The Absolute Sound, certainly one of the most influential publications in the industry.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'll be the moderator today for Meet the Editors, which is also known as the Reviewer Roast. So this is your opportunity to ask us questions about any topics that are on your mind about how we review products or what we think about certain things in general, technologies, technology trends. So I'll introduce the panelists. At the far left is David Robinson of Positive Feedback. Next to him is Michael Fremer of Stereophile. In the middle is John Darko, and next to me is Chris Conacher, founder of Computer Audiophile. So let's kick it off with a question. Who wants to be first? No one ever wants to be first at these things. Someone's got to have a question.
If you don't ask a question, we're going to ask you a question.
That's right. How many people own turntables here?
All right.
How many people own music servers? How many people listen to headphones on a regular basis?
There's a mini music server in every one of your pockets right now. That's a phone as well.
I have a question. Regarding the Absolute Sound and Stereophile magazine, my question is, the rate of albums, vinyl is so important today. Why are most of the reviews on Stereophile on a CD?
I can answer that question. Well, first of all, I have my own website, Analog Planet, where we do only vinyl, nothing else. The music section of Stereophile is sort of a separate entity that the music editor runs, and the editor of Stereophile is a hands-off guy in that sense. He doesn't interfere in that. You could also, and the editor of the magazine is a hands-off guy in terms of that section. You should ask that question of the editor of the music section, because I would ask the same question. But since I have my own publication now that is only vinyl, it's taken the pressure off me asking that same question. So just come to Analog Planet and you'll get only record reviews.
We do a mix in the Absolute Sound, and if it's unavailable on LP, we'll mention it in the review. And we also have a separate section just for high-res downloads. Every month we have rock and pop high-res downloads and classical high-res downloads. But I take a similar approach to the music section. We have a music editor, and he determines what we publish in the music section. He knows a lot more than I do about music, so.
That's the proper management approach to this. You hire an editor to edit a particular section. You don't want to interfere with what he's doing. If you don't like what he's doing, you get another editor, but you don't interfere with him once he's there.
one other thing that I would say is that's generally true not only of music, but also of hardware. If you ask yourself, how come people review what they review, it's because they generally tend to review what they're interested in. It's very hard to get somebody to review something they don't like. Some people have the notion that reviewers are running around as objective people who are looking at everything, and actually they're just like anybody else. They have biases, they have preferences, and you want to make sure that you match people up with what they like. If they don't like it, don't give it to them. And so you're getting a reflection in all the publications of what people like, what they're interested in. Same as you.
Well, I just finished reviewing a Class D amplifier that was digital throughout, so I had to digitize my analog to play records. And I took one for the team. And I actually liked it. So sometimes it's good for us to step outside of our comfort zone and pick something that we don't think we'll like or that we're vehemently against. Like in my Class D amplifiers, I just haven't heard any that I liked. But the manufacturer took a chance also. He said, I want you to review it, because I think I have something that you will actually like.
So can I ask a question of you now, then, Michael, if I may? Because you've been, I believe Mr. Fremmer has been digitizing vinyl quite a bit recently.
For a long time.
Right, but you've been doing a more extensive coverage of T.H.E converters recently. And my question to you is, if you digitize your vinyl and play it back to a DAC, do you think it loses something in that process? Or do you think that a 24-192 PCM container is more than sufficient to capture everything that comes out of your phono stage?
It loses something in transparency,
right?
But more than losing something, it gains the sonic signature of the A to D converter. Right. That's what when we listen to music and we maybe play around with an EQ or we change a cable and we sort of modify things in the analog domain a little bit, it has like a shaping effect on the sound. But when you play different A to D converters, everything that goes through it is like a paper shredder. It shreds everything. Everything takes on the sonic signature of that A to D converter. Right. And that's the biggest problem. And that's a major change. That's like a sea change. Like the Roxy Music box set just came out. It's all 9624 files. Right. It really sounds good. In some ways, it's better than a few original pressings. It's better in certain ways. Right. But every one of those records has the sonic signature of the A to D converter, whatever it was, and that comes through really loud and clear.
So
and
you can hear that. You can hear the XD conversion. So if you get a record and you've got no idea of its provenance, and you play it, and you can pick it that this came from a digital source.
Almost always you can tell that.
Okay.
Even if it's really good because they're not doing things to make it worse that were done originally when it came out on records because they were afraid people couldn't play it on their crappy turntables.
Right.
So some of the Roxy Music albums were definitely dynamically compressed. Yeah. And they were the bass was rolled off a little bit. So the reissue actually sounds better in terms of dynamics and frequency response, but it has this particular coloration that you can't escape because it's always there and it's on every one of the records in the box.
So you gain better dynamics, but you also gain this kind of weird sheen, or maybe I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I saw your video on the box because your dogs came in during the filming, right?
Yeah. Which I left in the video because it's fun.
Well, it's you're giving of yourself and your personality. I think it's important, right? Which is actually
I can't help myself.
Well, I think that's something that I think is really important. Is as a person that writes about hi-fi, it can get very dry very quickly, and I guess I am my own brand in many ways, but I like to give of myself and not write too much about myself, because there's nothing worse than a review or a reviewer who makes the review all about them. Right, that's just the worst as far as I'm concerned. But
when it starts with I, and then I, and then what I did next was.
But you need to be able to kind of give the reader some insight into your life, or show them what your room looks like, because otherwise, a stock photo doesn't tell you anything about the product, how it looks in your space, and what you're working with. And I think people like to have a little bit of insight into your life, because otherwise you're just some kind of anonymous guy with a blank page and stock photos and just a few words. So anyway, that's my...
I agree.
Yeah.
This gentleman
As
has
a side note to that, you do have ability to do needle drops to DSD, and that's a different kind of creature entirely. When you talk PCM 192.24, to my ears, it has a very definite sound. I mean, PCM sounds like PCM. 192.24 is better than 44.1. We're generally agreed about that, generally. Doing needle drops to DSD, single or double DSD, for example, is a different experience. And so we can't really, you can say that you do hear the quality of the conversion process, but the conversion process is very different and it has a very different feel on the playback. So you need to be aware of that.
So do you still hear that, the character of the A to D when you rip in DSD?
In DSD, what I find is, for example, if I go to a sweet spot area, a double DSD from a quality analog rig, to my ear, it sounds noticeably better than even a 192.24. There's a different feel to DSD generally. There's sort of an ease, a naturalness, a roundness that I associate more with analog than I do with digital. If we get to the point where we're able to do needle drops at quad DSD, I think we may find that we're listening to the groove. And we're not quite there yet, but it's different. The quality of the conversion, though, I would agree with Michael. You'll hear it. A $1,500 DSD AD is not going to sound quite as well as a reference level DAC. Something like the Hoppy from Merging Technologies. If you do have the sharps, the chops to handle Pyramix software, then you can have quad DSD needle drops. And I'm really pretty close to being categorical. It's essentially indistinguishable. But that's a fundamentally different thing, and that's not rolled out for the typical consumer right now.
The funny thing is, you have analog and digital wars about which is better, but the wars between PCM and DSD are pretty strong too. I mean, Mark Waldrop will be here banging on your head all day for what you just said. He's PCM, and this Stanley Lipschitz, who was this theoretical engineer in Canada, who says DSD does not work. I mean, that's what's so much fun about this whole hobby. You'll hear this, and that's true, and then you'll hear the other side, then you'll hear vinyl's better, then you'll hear CDs are perfect. That's one of the laughable things. But anyway, so okay, I'll stop. I'm finished.
That's okay, because some of the commentators have a lot of glare too.
This gentleman had a question.
DSD. Yeah, there are two main alternatives I can point to. One is to go to, for a more affordable option that's pretty simple to use, go to Korg. You can still get Korg MR2000s for about, depending on where you buy it, $1,600 to $1,900, and it comes with a pretty nifty software package called AudioGate, and it makes it easy to do needle drops and does them in 12-minute chunks and then splices them together, and it sounds really good. You can get double DSD from your needle drops, and they're really good. But if you want the really serious option, it's not for the faint-hearted, and you've got to have a budget. But I invested in the Merging Technologies Hoppy 8-channel version with which will do single, double, and quad DSD plus PCM with the Pyramix software package, which really ups the price. I mean, that package will cost you about $9,500, but you're getting pro-grade gear. This is what the pros are using in the studio to make the greatest of the recordings that we're hearing right now. If you really like software, if you like bleeding, Pyramix is the top. It's the best thing out there right now for DSD.
How do you handle metadata and putting the album titles and all that information in that?
It's actually a several-step process. Part of the problem is that with quad, it's not a problem with single or double, but quad DSDs, Sony never released, it hasn't yet released the final metadata spec for DSF. There are two file formats in DSD. One is DFF, which is the original transfer format, but it has no room for metadata. It's just a raw file. Once you add metadata, you have to convert the file to DSF. That has the metadata, so you can have covers and liner notes and times, everything you want. There's a third-party utility that is being used currently while they wait for Sony to do what Sony does, which is eventually maybe kind of get around to it.
Sony basically just has abandoned it.
Yeah, well, that'll be Sony. So that's really how it's done. If you want to find more information about that, you can get in touch with the good folks over at nativedsd.com, Jared Sachs and Company. They've got great stuff online over there, and it'll explain all about the processes, and they can even tell you the kinds of utilities you need to use, okay?
I was wondering if you could comment on the difficulty for a consumer to assess what an audio product jitter actually is, because there are ways of measuring it. A lot of products don't report it even. And what is the limit of audio? For you gentlemen's average age, what would the lower limit of audibility of jitter be? How many picoseconds?
I think a lot of the jitter numbers are entirely made up, to be honest with you. I think they're total fabrications. I mean, a picosecond, I think, is the time it takes light to travel an inch.
I can see that.
So they're talking femtoseconds.
Yeah, this is why we call it jitter.
How do you measure such small quantities? That's an important topic. When Keith Johnson was developing HDCD, I visited him in his lab, and he had this three-dimensional circuit that he had built, and he was measuring the difference between 5 and 8 picoseconds of jitter at the time, and he said he could hear the difference between 5 and 8 picoseconds of jitter. Now people claim, much lower numbers, but there's no question that jitter is a really significant and fundamental aspect, a source of degradation in digital audio. And at one time, 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, it was dismissed as the height of audiophile lunacy, that the bits were the same, but the sound would be different. And there was this other factor, the timing of the clocking, that turned out to be a significant factor. And so the short answer is, I think people make the numbers up.
But as a consumer, if you're looking to see to work out how high or low your source is in jitter, it's very difficult. But I just saw in the Headphonium here, the T.H.E Audio, the top two DACs, the Yggdrasil and the Gungnir, I think I've said that right, they have a little light on the front panel. And I didn't know about this until today. And what happens is when the incoming signal, when it arrives at the DAC, a microprocessor analyzes that signal for jitter. And if it's high in jitter, it puts the light on the front and lights it up and says, you need to buy better gear, which I think is kind of cool. It tells you, so if you put an Airport Express into these T.H.E Audio DACs, that thing will light up, because the Airport Express, super high in jitter, generally. I don't know whether Chris would agree with me on this or not, but my experience is that it kind of sounds pretty lousy, even over optical. So I would recommend going there, even having a look at the T.H.E DAC, just for that feature alone. I think it's kind of cool. I wish more companies would do that. You might think it's a bit of a gimmick, I don't know, but I think it's cool.
Well, Bob,
I think they're definitely full of shit.
Well, Bob might suggest that maybe the light isn't hooked up to anything. Randomizer.
I don't pay attention to any of the jitter measurements, because if you talk to some of the best designers in the industry, they'll all laugh at them. They don't mean anything.
Right. I think there's a good amount of propaganda that goes on. People generally know that you had better be below 50 picoseconds. The closer you get to 10 picoseconds, that's generally considered to be good. Now we have femtosecond clocks now. Though, for example, the new Exosound E28 and E22 have an 82 femtosecond claimed accuracy rate. Overall, because digital is very time sensitive, and the human ear does pick up phase and time. I mean, phase and time are aligned in audio. In analog, it works really well because because analog doesn't screw this stuff up. But in the digital domain, when you're transmitting signal, the lower the accuracy rate, the higher the error rate. You get above a certain point. I generally think that if you get into the 50 to 100 picosecond error rate, you're going to start noticing that it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound as good as clocks that are better than that. You know.
Those aren't age-related.
No.
The phase in time is not related to age. It's been shown that no matter how old you get, those things you're sensitive to. Amplitude response when you get older, not a different story.
Yeah. Well, your grandparents can spot where you are even if they can't hear so well.
That's right.
I mean, they can locate you.
Where I was coming from is that my understanding is that at high frequencies, jitters become audible. And I, for example, have hearing frequency that cuts out of 30,000.
Yeah, and that's because because what you're having is at the higher frequency rates, sampling, the accuracy of sampling is becoming more and more important. It was one of the real problems with Redbook back at the beginning. Redbook always sounded tolerable on the low end because at 44.1 kHz, a 20 hertz signal was being well sampled and phase was being much better represented. You get up above 1,000 to 2,000 cycles with PCM Redbook, and phase starts to drift because the sampling rate is having to hit a higher frequency, and the accuracy of phase begins to drift. Above 5,000 cycles, it gets horrible. Above 10,000, it's totally random, which is why it ends up sounding kind of flat, sort of non-dimensional. It's why you go back to your LP and say, oh, hell, this sounds great. Why does my CD sound the way it does? Well, you can't locate things. It's not dimensional.
But we were laughed at for saying that, too.
Oh, yeah.
We get laughed at for everything, but just get used to it and don't worry about it, because we're ultimately right.
I go to the LP and think it sounds terrible.
You haven't heard a good LP.
I'll be honest.
You haven't heard a good LP?
Yeah, well, I would agree with Michael on that. But you do have to do analog setup and playback correctly.
That's right.
If you don't do it correctly, you can get some terrible results with LP. Plus, there's some really bad pressings.
Yes, you have to have it. It's got to be good.
Yeah.
It's like fresh food. If you let it rot, it tastes terrible.
Yeah.
There are designers in their 70s doing their best work today. So I think a little high-frequency roll-off isn't that big a deal. Like Keith Johnson, for example. You listen to recordings he makes, he's in his mid-70s, and I think he makes the best classical recordings in the world.
Yeah, very good.
Particularly Michael, I know that of course he's getting more and more different every year. That recording. Talking about digital, analog, and DSD catching up to LP. What do you feel is the future of the LPs are going to continue to get to more of the DSD?
It's hard to predict these things because, as much as I'm an LP fan, I would never have predicted it would get to this popularity and size it is now. So it all depends what people want. Some people like the form factor better. The more music that's available online or to stream, where there's 2 billion different things and you don't know what you want, the more it becomes pleasurable and attractive to have something that you can grab onto. And that's what kids tell me. And I think the real issue is the quality of the recording, and like the Beatles at the BBC came out on CD and it came out on vinyl. Now there's no doubt that those were not great recordings, and it was sourced from a digital source for the record too. So I played the CD through and I enjoyed it. It sounded what it sounded like. And then I put the record on because they sent it to me and I put it on. And there were interviews with the 4 Beatles, and when I played it on the CD, it was just, but when the record came on, for whatever reason that would drive him crazy, when the record came on and John Lennon started talking, I had this reaction. It was like he was right there in my room, and it gave me the shakes. I don't care if it's an additive distortion. Every recording you play is nonsense. They're all nonsense. They're all fake. They're all played with recordings. You can't put a symphony orchestra in 2 microphones. Someone's playing with it to give it the sense of reality. If putting it on a lacquer and pressing it makes it sound more real, then it sounds more real and more pleasing to your ears, and that's what matters. And when I talk to kids, they listen to records after growing up on MP3s, and to them it's like this thing, and they get it for whatever reason.
So Urban Outfitters is the largest vinyl reseller, and I think it's just a fad. It's kind of cool right now. And if you look at how many albums Taylor Swift sold last year, it's more than all the vinyl put together. So
What? That's wrong.
no.
Yes, it is.
This huge resurgence of vinyl, to me, is like a micro percentage point.
It's up to 6%. When it was 1%, he laughed. When it was 2%,
6% of what?
of the total sales of software. 6%. Look, this whole industry is nothing compared to the crap out there. Fine food is nothing compared to McDonald's. That is not even an issue that's relevant to any of this discussion, because if it was, we'd all go home and play our iPods and be done with it. That's not part of this discussion.
It's all about music, and I think
Of course it's all about
if we fool people into thinking there's like this massive vinyl resurgence and that it's even
is a vinyl
it might
resurgence.
okay, there's a vinyl resurgence,
Yes.
but it is not large.
It is large. It's 33 million records last year. 33 million records compared to how many downloads? It doesn't matter compared to the crap that most people listen to. This whole place here is nonsense. It's nothing. Our whole industry should just go home because we mean nothing, because in the big picture we're this percent. So vinyl is 6% of the sales. It's not a huge thing, but it's making a lot of people money. People love it. I don't understand why it's a problem for you.
It's not a problem
It
at
is a
all.
problem for you.
I would love people to enjoy music. No, it's not a problem, but I just like to, if we could operate on facts and say, okay.
You're just being insulting. I operate on facts every day. 33 million records are pressed.
Okay, let's say your definition of huge
I
and
don't
my
say it's
definition.
huge. You say it's huge. I never said it was huge.
I think
Rewind the tape.
you guys are talking about the same thing from a different angle. It's huge in the context of the history of vinyl sales, but in the history of all media sold, it's small. Of
course.
Right, and I think you're both saying that.
Yeah, well, guess what? High-end audio is a small thing in the larger world.
Nothing.
But high-end audio, what I call fine audio, has never been about what's the mass doing. That's right. It's about a passion and a love. We believe as a group, and it's a vibrant community. High-end is not dying. High-end is resurging.
All over the world.
All over the world, yeah, and the young guy, hey, I got grandsons who have turntables, and they're out shopping the bins, and I got to buy them albums all the time. They get it. No, I think it's about, I think we have to understand that we as a group, from the days of Gordon Holt and Harry Pearson and all the rest, we as a group believe that quality makes a difference, and the difference makes a difference. I keep coming back to that. This is a cultural thing. You're born with a tongue, you learn taste. You train your senses to develop sensibilities. And so you're looking at a young person, you're looking at your grandson, you're looking at whoever, and you're saying, okay, I dig that you like MP3s or compressed stuff and whatever the pop thing of the week is. But you got to get into the great stuff. You'll never come to understand the difference between mediocre and great until you spend some time with great. Okay, I dig that you like, whatever garbage is
Kids
there.
get it when they
Oh, they do, The first time they hit Mozart, the first time that they hit Miles, it changes them.
But for kids to hear great, they have to be able to acquire the music that they like in the format that is you might consider great. So it's very easy for me to go, and I do this all the time, go and sit on Amazon.com and buy tons of records, right? I can buy anything I want on vinyl, piece of cake, and I love it. But if I want to go and buy Tom Waits, David Bowie, or anything like that in DSD, it's not there. The library is wafer thin. So, you were asking, this gentleman here was asking whether the technical advantages that DSD brings will ever kind of compete with vinyl. Well, even if it does, that's an academic argument because it has no bearing in reality because
At this point,
you can't.
No. You
can't put your stake in the ground on the basis of a promise on the future,
Right.
which we don't know is going to happen.
Well, I can say this. Qualitatively, I know the excellence. So I know that the promise is there.
Right.
I know what it can deliver. Now,
Sure.
the larger picture of growing a standard, well, it's like stereo. Many people have forgot it took 12 to 15 years for stereo to hit full-fledged. The Beatles were mixing mono right up until 67, 68 as their main standard. The Beach Boys, all the rest of them.
Compare those Beatle albums to the CD version.
Oh.
Go compare them and then tell me what.
Buy the box set of the mono Beatles.
Yeah.
It'll kill you.
And then listen to the CD.
Yeah, you'll throw away the CDs. No, the promise is there. Acoustic Sounds, their super high-res site, they just announced that they just passed 500 titles. They get it. The people who buy it get it. You're starting to see DSD because people in the high end are starting to demand it. I don't expect Joe Sixpack to be buying it right now. It's going to take a while for us to get to 10,000 titles, like SACD is right now.
Very few people in high-end audio have six-packs.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're really talking about the fact that this is going to take time, and I'm a patient guy. What I know is what it can do to transform lives, and so I've been very patiently for years, have been saying we need to pay attention to this, and as we get behind it, it'll become an alternative, just like LPs are. We have LPs right now because there were enough of us, and guys like Michael, who went out there and said, pay attention. This is damn great stuff. Why do you think we have a resurgence? It's because of enough of us got out there and put our bucks where our mouths were, and we bought the damn stuff, and Chad will tell you, if you'll buy it, I'll provide it. He'll provide it.
So do you think the broader catalogue of DSD will ever get close to that? That's available.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. What I think is this. I think we're running into a difficulty, and I guess I better break it to you. Most of the major record labels are dysfunctional to useless, okay? They do iTunes because it's money sitting on the ground, okay? You start talk to Chad about it, he'll tell you. You start talking about DSD, and most of them being run by lawyers, CPAs, and bean counters, they don't get it. What's the deal with this? Can I sell 1 million of these? Well, not to start. They don't even have contract templates. If they're attorneys.
Do vinyl, then they should be willing to do
Yeah, the special projects guys, some of them are. But you know what's really driving it? What's driving it right now is the same thing that drove early stereo and all of the high-end kind of labels way back in the late 50s and early 60s, the mobile fidelity type guy. The people who listened and said, holy shit, we have got to get this out there because this makes a difference. Those people are driving it, and it's always true. Always true.
Apple was nothing. Apple was gone. Apple was finished. Forget about Apple. It's a tiny little part of the business. It's nothing. But Apple was quality on some level, and that's why it ended up.
Yeah, and I think that business model, what we're seeing with the DSD download and the PCM download sites too, we're seeing that the Apple business model clicked.
That's right.
People saw, you can sell this stuff 7 by 24 by 365 and a quarter a year. You can make money. It's an endless money machine. There's no inventory. You buy hard disk space, you put up a point of sale site, you got some storage. And once you got transaction processing down, which we do, the infrastructure's there. So you can sell compressed stuff if you want to. On that same server, you can sell DSD. You can sell quad DSD, and they're selling it, and it's out there selling. If you want it, if you'll pay for it, if you'll invest in quality the way that we did back in the late 50s, then we will see it.
I'd just like to add that Michael Fremer deserves a lot of credit for waving the analog banner during its darkest days when no one knew it was going to resurge like it did. It looked like it was on its way out, and he never flagged in his enthusiasm. So,
but I'll tell you, sir, I was on an airplane recently with a 17-year-old girl and her mother, and we're talking. I told them what I did, and the daughter said, all of my friends have turntables, and I'm going to get one too. And the mother said, well, I play CDs. And the daughter said, Mom, you're so old-fashioned. It was so.
I love that.
I wanted to bottle that. It was.
Another gentleman over here.
This gentleman has a question.
I got something about this old download. I got into downloads for a while, during all with HD tracks. Then I got into the DSD download. And then I started reading this guy, Mark Walker, one of you mentioned earlier. I've been spending any money on that until I understand this dude. I don't know if he's a death or if he's right. This dude is out there saying that unless it's recorded as DSD in the first place, and I did great for PCM in the first place, that it's really low res, but being repackaged and sold for a lot more money.
Answer is, I'll tell you right now, this goes back to the record label problem. If you think that the major record labels and some of the smaller ones have much of a notion about the provenance of their recordings, their inventory, forget it. They have no idea. They're paying some minimum wage droid to run around and manage the catalog and stick stuff on shelves and look for things on special projects. You talk to T.H.E, you talk to any of the reissuing folks, Audio Fidelity, you talk to Ying Tan, they'll tell you, you got to stay on these guys like fleas on a dog to attempt, when you say, we want the master tape, a lot of people don't know what you're talking about.
And the tapes have been mislabeled over the decades. Like, it turns out that the tape that's labeled "do not use" is the master tape, and someone labeled it "do not use" because it is the master tape, but they don't want it used, and they were using copies.
Sure.
Well, this Mark Walker guy in his story, that what you're saying
Yep.
has got me back in the record band with the used record.
Oh, well, don't count on it with the record bins either. A lot of stuff from the middle 80s onward, you're getting some digital in that chain.
Even if they had the analog tape, they put a digital delay line in place of the preview head, and so you're getting a 6-bit recording.
Yeah, so our problem is with provenance generally. Now, guys, if you go with righteous people like T.H.E, he moves heaven and earth. We owe a huge debt to T.H.E.
Absolutely.
Because he is fighting the good fight with these guys. Good example just recently. They had Frank Sinatra to the DSD download section, and man, I saw that and zoom, I'm going. And I purchased about a half a dozen of them. I bought them. They don't give them to me.
You feel pretty sure that you get over the shed, it's under DSD, problems.
Well, let me tell you what happened. I bought about a half a dozen. I got the box set, the MoFi box set of all the Sinatras, but I was really curious to hear the DSD, so I bought a bunch. And then one of my correspondents, one of my editors who is a DSD specialist, got in touch and he said, wait a minute, I'm getting reports that there's something brick wall happening with these Sinatras. And I said, pardon me? Holy shit. Really? I bought a half a dozen of these things. So I got in touch with my contacts and connections there, and I said, Mark, what the hell's going on? I'm getting this report. He said, really? So he said, I'll get back to you. He gets on the line. He and T.H.E go, and I won't mention the source except that it rhymes with Naxos. And he said that when he got in touch with Naxos and said, now this is DSD, because they sent DSD files. They said, we got it. Here's the DSD. Mark said, where did the DSD files come from? The guy said, a 192.24 that we did. And he said, we're out of here. They had to put a big disclaimer up now on the Sinatra, and guess what happened to the Sinatra download sales? Why? We who are interested in DSD are not interested in PCM through DSD. We want DSD from analog. If it's a master tape, give us the analog.
I would say, don't think as much about sample rate, PCM, or DSD. Think about the people behind it. That's what really matters. I'll take a Doug Sachs recording at 44.1 over, Joe Sixpack at 192.
Yeah, but I want Doug Sachs at Quad DSD.
So,
give me Doug Sachs at Quad DSD. I shouldn't have to choose between greatness of mastering engineer and greatness of format. I want the best on the best. Thank you.
One aspect of the format, the MQA format that I've written about recently, Meridian or Master Quality Authenticated, there's a light that comes on the decoder, and if that light comes on, you know that the entire chain was bit perfect, and you also know that that signal that you're hearing was what was approved by the artist and the producer in the studio. So there's no question about the provenance of a recording when you see the MQA light come on the decoder. So I think that's going to solve a lot of these problems, because if the signal was ever in 44.1 16-bit, the damage has been done and nothing can undo it.
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, but we can have truth in labeling. You know, I don't want GMOs in my food. I think we have the right to know what's in our recording chain. What we have traditionally relied on in audiophile, in the world of audiophile recordings, is truth in labeling. Show me your production notes.
But you've said that dealing with labels, you have to be on like fleas on a dog, and it's counters and bean counters. And if it's a battle for even Sinatra recordings, how are you ever going to get a huge catalog to? Well, not you, but Chad's going to get a enormous catalog together if he has to fight every single time.
And the answer is the same thing that we have always faced. LPs, everything. It's always been a fight. What we value as audiophiles is of not much importance to most record companies.
Right.
Yeah, and so we represent defenders of the quality, of excellence. I just don't want you to think that the record labels are our friends. They are not here to serve the music. They're here to serve their corporation and their bottom line. I respect Chad for fighting that fight, but you see, even Chad can get fooled. I mean, we have to analyze any of these digital things.
That's what happened to HD Tracks.
Exactly.
When HD Tracks started, the major labels brought over hard drives and said, here's the high resolution file or something, and they put it up. They didn't pay attention, and then it took the readers to go and put it up on a spectrum analyzer and see a brick wall filter, and that was humiliating to them, and they had to go back and rethink everything.
How do you know what you're getting from HD Tracks? You gotta ask all the
Well, they're being more careful now, and they put it up. They have people that put the files up on an analyzer.
They claim to verify everything that they sell now.
Hybrid SACD, the SACD layer was simply the CD layer somehow
they just converted it to DSD from 44.1. There are even tracks within albums where some of them are analog and some of them are PCM on the same album.
I was on a panel at an Audio Engineering Society convention with Roger Nichols, who engineered a lot of the Steely Dan albums, and he was telling me that when CDs first came out, he went in a store and bought a Steely Dan CD that he'd engineered, and he listened to it and was horrified because he had no involvement in it. Here's the CD. So he went back and researched what had happened, and so they mixed to the original analog 2-track, and then they make a safety master of that. So they put the original analog away, they use the safety master. That goes to the cutting house. They decide what compression and equalization to use to cut the record. So they make another transfer, third generation tape, with those equalization compression settings, and then they make a safety master of that. So it ended up being about a 7th generation tape used to make the CD. So
it's why they called it Steely.
They went, Walter Becker and Donald Fagen went to Warner Brothers, and they pulled all the CDs. They recalled every CD, and Roger Nichols went back, got the original master tapes, and redid the entire catalog from scratch, and got involved himself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a commendable story, but it tells you
And the records still
what
sound
happens.
better.
Yeah. They do.
You say MQA is getting the consumer.
The question is, how close is MQA getting to the consumer?
How many days is it to be available?
I'm going to say within 90 days. I talked to a guy at T.H.E who used the word furiously in describing their process for converting their library to MQA encoded files. So for those who haven't heard, MQA is a format that delivers, it's a single bit stream. It fits in a FLAC file or an Apple lossless file that delivers at least high resolution in a single bit stream that can be streamed to a phone. And they call it audio origami, where it folds in the high resolution information, puts it into what they call a 1x bit stream that fits in a 44.1 channel, and then it unfolds on playback and you get high resolution. Because conventional PCM is massively inefficient. When you think about the sampling rate and the number of bits per sample, it can encode 96 kilohertz at 144 dB, and in real life, you never encounter those signals, but those bits are being applied. So it's a much more efficient and better sounding process. And I'm scheduled to get a server and a DAC in about 2 weeks, so I'm going to have a full report on MQA. It's a really exciting development. The ability to bring high res to anybody, even someone with a phone, is...
It sounds amazing. I mean,
it does sound amazing.
you heard that Bob Dylan track that they played at CES?
It's unbelievable, isn't
If that had been
it?
CD, I wouldn't be in business with vinyl. That would have been it.
It's unbelievably sounding.
But isn't MQA predicated on the idea that the guy in the studio has to encode it as MQA right there and then, right?
No, the high-res file can be converted into an MQA file, and the metadata stream contains information about the A to D converter.
Yes.
And it undoes the damage caused by the A to D, that specific A to D converter.
See, I kind of have a hard time believing it can do that because it's basically I mean, I did sit on a presentation in Munich last week about MQA, and yeah, Bob Stewart did say that they can fix the damage, the filter ringing damage done by standard studio encoding. But he's asking, if you want to get an MQA encoded file, apart from the fixing they can do, if you want to make one, you have to make it in the studio, encode it, and go, right, that's my file, right?
It's better if it's done like that.
Right, yes, that's the optimal way of doing that. But so you're asking studios to change their encoding behavior, and you're also asking them to pay for the privilege. And I just don't see it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
They have a model, though. I was told this off the record.
Yeah.
So don't repeat this.
So don't say what you're about to say.
There's no financial penalty to the record label. I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
So Bob Stewart's not going to sell the encoding algorithm to studios, or he's going to give it away for free? That's the only way there's no financial penalty, right?
The revenue stream comes from the decoder.
Right.
All right.
So they don't want to charge the record. The record labels don't want to pay.
Yeah.
But I was chatting to Steve Guttenberg a few days ago, and he was saying that, he has far more experience than I do in mastering studios and things like that, and he was saying these guys are quite happy doing things the way they are, right? They're more than happy just going with the way they've always done it.
Not everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Well, not everyone. But
A lot of them are demanding better quality.
Sure, but again, it's like when we come back to the potential argument, say, of DSD, right? And it's the same with MQA. I can see strong similarities. You can promise things. You can go, this sounds amazing. I'm sure that Dylan track was wonderful. But until the library is there, I just can't believe in it. You can show me all the technical advantages you like for 10 songs or 3,000 songs, but it's just not a convincing argument, even for the broader audiophile market, unless you've got a decent library, right?
Tidal will have tens of thousands of titles at launch.
Sure.
And the other reason that record labels like it is single inventory. They don't have to make a low-res file, a high-res, and LP and CD. They make a single file that works on all platforms for everyone.
It definitely has a lot of potential in a streaming sector.
But it addresses a particular question, and that's the provenance question. If you want to find a technical means for trying to lock in, this is a bit perfect stream, it doesn't change the fact that it's PCM. It is addressing the question of trying to stream at what are considered high-res rates, but there's a discussion, even a pretty good argument about whether or not 44.1 is even really a high-res format.
I think it's the ground floor of high-res audio.
And that's the question. Some people say it's the ground floor, others say, that's 30 years of bad stuff. It's just old.
But in the broader context of, the world being, listening to lossy music on their, lossy encoded music on their phone, I would rather see us trying to champion the removal of lossy encoders. That's for me
I agree
where the battle
completely.
really starts. Right?
I agree
thing is
completely.
down the road.
What Tidal does, and the mainstream media just craps all over Tidal.
Tidal is amazing. It's fantastic.
But it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's totally cool.
Yeah. You see, the whole move to compression and portability has cost us a lot.
Yeah.
We couldn't on the internet. I've been on the internet since '84. I watched the puppy grow up, and I can tell you that bandwidth was the great garrote in a lot of what was going on in audio with computers for a long time. Between that and storage, well, we reached the point where we can start getting CD quality. It can be realized now in streaming, and I think that's good. That's better than compressed MP3.
Yeah.
It's still not DSD, and I'm going to be a broken wheel on that one. I think
It's worse than me.
Oh no! Well, hey, I'm every bit as good as Michael. I'll just tell you that the question for me is, I think it's a good thing that PCM can recover Redbook and streaming settings and the like, and if we can lock in provenance in a way that doesn't make it look like Bob Stewart getting out there with another proprietary idea. HDCD, you'll remember, attempted to do the same thing, and I think that the solutions are too little, too late for real high resolution.
I think it's really great that, I'm quite humbled to sit next to two guys that are very fanatical about their own specialist areas.
Yeah.
And that idealism is what pushes things forwards at the limit.
Yeah.
My personal take is more pragmatic.
Yeah.
What's available to the majority of people.
Well.
And I guess in the vinyl arena, the availability is there. It's far broader. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I look, I got a ton of CDs. I've been through it all. I just never got rid of my LPs, which meant that I never lost my mind during CDs. And then when, I had an open reel tape machine. I think I've got every format that was ever done all the way along the way.
Wire recorder?
No.
You have a surround sound wire recorder?
My son took scissors to that. No, I got DATs, I got everything. And so I appreciate all the formats, and I listen carefully to them. I would say that I respect what we're recovering there in the Redbook level. In the context of streaming and the rest of that, that's good. It's better than iTunes. What I'm going to champion is I'm never going to let go of my LPs. Never, never, never. But I'm looking to the future, and I'm saying, what can we do? What do I think is the very best? And I know what it is, and I'm playing it in my room right now. You can go to 441, and you can listen to it all day long. And so when you hear Quad DSD on a really good system, you listen to Quad DSD. If you have any questions after that, you have a lot of things to learn.
All right.
I mean, seriously.
We're out of time. We're just getting going.
The argument's just beginning.
So thanks everyone for coming.
Good. Thank you.